everybody. Welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting. Everyone is checked in. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Item 3, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. Council may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the council? Mr. Pinker first.
And Mr. Mayor, if I'm talking too quietly, please.
You what's that?
If I'm talking too quietly, please let me know.
I'll let you know.
Good evening, William Penker, 600 Sycamore Avenue. I have 3 comments this evening. The first is related to your last meeting. The second and third are related to issues arising from our year-long experience with the pandemic. I wish you and the Fire and Police Commission success in resolving the issues discussed at your last meeting, and I hope you and the other parties can reach a resolution that is rapid, peaceful, and without undue effects to the various participants. The second matter is communication. Has the City of Marshfield effectively communicated both critical and general information to both residents and those coming to Marshfield for employment, shopping, medical appointments, business, and other purposes? Has the city effectively utilized the full spectrum of media resources, print, broadcast, including municipal and commercial television, AM and FM radio, web-based means, social media, and Nixle over the past year? Has there been an undue emphasis on and use of a narrow part of that media spectrum? As is done in public safety press releases and press conferences, was there a single source of information, the public information officer? Was there a single point similar to the public safety answering point to which residents and non-residents could direct questions and receive answers? And the last matter is continuity of operations. Does the City of Marshfield have a continuity of operations plan? Certainly during the past year, continuity of operation could have been a significant issue. I reference section 7.02 and 7.04 of the City Code. And if there is such a plan, has it been effectively communicated to the citizen members of the various boards, commissions, and committees, as well as to the public? As always, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? Please go to the podium and state your name and address.
My name is Dorothy Schnitzler. I live in Marshfield. And I would like to address our mayor, first of all. You had mentioned a few months ago that you had planned town hall meetings here at the City Hall in this room with low attendance. I think it was a great plan, Mayor, and it still should be offered. Perhaps to put it to notice the public on focus. Did you? I don't know.
Ma'am, you can make your statement.
Okay, and to get the word out on Facebook, newsfeed, and everyone sees that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the Marshfield Utility for answering my questions. I'm very pleased with that. I have another request. Thank you for the answers that I requested and your gracious conversations that we had, Nicholas. My additional requests, I will list them here, but I won't mention them. Last month, a Marshfield resident asked if the utility would sell to Wisconsin Public Service. Can that be a possibility? In the past, the Marshfield utility had videos of their meetings online. I don't see that anymore, and I think it should be videoed again. Respectively submitted. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? All right, seeing none, we'll go to item D. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the December 15, 2020 and a December 29, 2020 special meeting? Motion by Mr. Butke, a second by Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. And that motion carries a 9-0 with one.
I didn't really mean to do that. I'm sorry.
Is that it? Was that
It was an A.
Motion?
Sorry.
Like a pirate. All right, item E, staff updates. Aquatic Center project, Justin Casperson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like each month, I'll stop by and update the council and the public on our progress down at the pool. I handed out some pictures to you that kind of show the progress that's going on. The pictures don't really do it justice because it does change quite a bit, but that's the best you can do with the camera. Rebar is being installed in the deep end of the pool. We are forming and enclosing the zero entry end of things and spraying shotcrete this week. Electrical, heating, and plumbing coordination in the truss spaces, which is the attic spaces, is being done this week. The attic mechanicals are all roughed in. The hope is to do and finish all the masonry interior walls this week. I want to point out a couple things on the pool itself. If you look at the page or the photos, that's aerial of the bathhouse itself, you'll see a wooden structure. That wooden structure is the actual pool vessels that's been enclosed to keep the heat and temperature at a desirable rate so concrete can be poured and shotcrete can cure at the proper temperatures. So you can see a lot of work that went into keeping it at a good temperature. The other side, if you flip it over, you can see obviously the mason walls and a lot of the rough ends of the plumbing going in. But on the bottom is the actual, we call a lazy river or a channel river. And then there's a seat wall right there. That's the bottom picture is actually the pool itself, which shotcrete will be done this week. Like always, if you guys ever want a tour, if you can't make it during business hours, feel free to get a hold of me. I'll give you guys a tour with the superintendent on site.
All right, thank you very much. Item F, mayor comments. Employee recognition, Steve Barg, city administrator, 10 years, and he will not be here tonight. He had an urgent personal matter come up. Lance Oldham in engineering, 10 years. Paul Tax, fire department, 5 years. And Sean Miller in engineering, 10 years. We do appreciate all that. And also, so the council is aware, item N is that we're taking that off the calendar for tonight. That'll come back in a couple of weeks. And then the final thing under mayor comments is we're not going to sing happy birthday, but it is, of course, Adam's birthday. Maybe we should sing. I don't know. You sure, Adam?
Yes.
Yeah, Rebecca will lead.
Yes, sing.
So thank you very much. Happy birthday. That's all for me. Item G, council comments. Any comments from the council? I'm seeing none. We will go to item H, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. All right, seeing none. Let's see, item I, for the consent agenda, is there a motion to receive and place a file approving all recommended actions in the consent agenda? Motion by Mr. Fire, a second by Mr. Fisher. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. That motion carries 10-0. Thank you. Item K, request to approve resolution number 2021-01, a resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed 16.845 million electric system revenue bonds, Series 2021A of the City of Marshfield, Wood, and Marathon Counties, Wisconsin, and providing for the payment of the bonds and other details with respect to the bonds, introduced by Ron Allman, the City Finance Director.
And I'll be brief. As the mayor mentioned, Steve was unable to make it today. So I just wanted to introduce the borrowing resolution before turning it over to Nick, Mike, and the Ehlers staff. So as you know, it's been a long road of prep, planning, bidding, discussion, and tonight we're looking at the borrowing resolution for the new Marshfield Utilities building. The resolution, as you're probably aware, it's an issuance and parameter resolution. The parameter part is a process we started with the city's last borrowing. The biggest difference is that instead of the council approving the resolution to award the bid, the resolution authorizes two people, in this case, myself and Nick, to sign off on the lowest bid as long as the parameters are met. And really what it does is it allows Ehlers some flexibility on the date of sale so that if the market looks clogged, they can move it back a day, move it forward a day to try to get us the best rate. So, and if you took a look at the pre-sale report, we're still in that era of historically low interest rates and hopeful for a favorable sale.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here to talk tonight about this last step in the process. You'll see the entire Utility Commission is here tonight, and just want to make sure everybody is familiar with everybody. So quick introductions. Nate, right up front. For those of you who don't know, Nate's been living in Marshfield for 30 years. 24 years of experience, starting, growing, and managing multiple businesses in the Marshfield area. Local, national, and international awards recognizing his growth and innovation. Paul, 44 years in healthcare, retired, a little jealous. Master's in hospital administration, bachelor's in physical therapy, black belt lean leader for 10 years at St. Joseph's Hospital. Harry, 42 years in the banking industry, 3 years of active duty, 15 years in the National Guard and Army Reserves, and volunteers with the DAV as a volunteer driver. John, 38 years as the owner of an electrical contractor in central Wisconsin, 8 years doing maintenance at Wildwood Regency. And myself, 29 years living in Marshfield, 23 years of experience starting, operating, and managing business that I own. So we also have Birschbach and Associates, the architect. We have Matt and Holly from Myron, and Dave from Ehlers, I think, is online. So plenty of resources should you have questions tonight. So just a quick recap of how we got here. We're talking about replacing the building and the financing for that tonight. The current building is about 55 years old, and it was built with vision at the time, but it served its useful life. The commission considered a number of options when planning began for solving the building problem back in 2011, ranging from remodel and addition to new construction on a fresh site, to new construction on the current site. And ultimately, it was the city's decision on the pool, resiting it where it was, and the encouragement from this body to work together with Justin and the pool that helped the Utility Commission make the decision to stay on the site that we were. Part of that came from the cooperation. Part of it came from the fact that the infrastructure on the site with the transmission and the high lines, we can't leave the site. So even if we built on a new site, we're stuck with the building that we have, and we'd have to bring it up to code and make it useful for somebody else. And we had visits with city staff, and there's no interest in that building the way it is. So ultimately, to solve the current issues of the lack of space, the lack of ADA compliance, bringing our multiple departments back under one roof for efficiency, improved security, modernizing the HVAC, inventory storage, and better vehicle storage and flow, along with envisioning the needs of the utility as it continues to adapt and serve the needs of Marshfield and its resident ratepayers over the next 50 years. The commission decided the best option was to start fresh on the same site. And as you'll recall, through multiple presentations, we've kind of walked through that over the last year. So when the current building was built in 1966, utility revenues were $1.7 million, with 6,426 electric customers that consumed 84 million kilowatt hours a year. In 2019, the utilities revenue was $36 million, with 13,562 electric customers that consumed 367 million kilowatt hours. So growth over that time has been 21 times on the revenue, twice as many customers, consuming 4 times as much electricity as the building handled in 1966. Thank goodness there was vision at the time that building was built and that it was built to handle many years. Today, the electric department and the Oak Street Water Department building square footage is almost 34,000 square feet. The initial space study in 2011 indicated that we needed about 77,500 square feet. Once remaining on the current site was settled, the commission considered and researched how to best resolve the issues that are faced today. We looked at an estimated total cost to make necessary repairs, remodeling, and additions to the existing building of about $15 million. And an estimated total cost of a new building on that same site at $17.5 million. The new building would be expected to last another 50 years, even though it would be paid off in 20. Both solutions would allow the water department to be under the same roof again, improving efficiency and communication, would bring the building into ADA compliance. Inventory and equipment would be properly protected and secured. Emergency power outage response times would be reduced. Proper security for staff and digital and physical assets. Improved quality of air for staff and customers. And an improved look for Marshfield Southern Gateway, along with the pool project, to potentially spur economic development. But remodel and expansion of the current building was less expensive. It was also limited, as many of you know who've tried to look at large remodel projects. You can't escape having to make compromises when working within the existing structure. And by starting from scratch, the building was able to be re-envisioned for the long term, not just for the current problems. When adding in the historic low interest rates, the annual cost difference between the $15 million and $16.65 million project is negligible. So as we've come toward the end of this project, the common things that we're hearing in questions have been about the building being too big, too expensive, too fancy, or that the timing is wrong. And we wanted to just kind of address those things one last time. So the building was sized initially through engineering. Mr. Birschbach, way back when in 2011 or something, did the original space needs study. And of course, that's gone through some iterations as times have continued to move on. In 2014, under Mr. Tresoni's leadership at the utility, this body was initially presented a concept for 115,000 square foot building. The leadership transition from Bob to Nick gave the project a reset, as well as serendipitously aligning us with a timeline that fit with the pool project and the low interest rates. With the reset in Nick's customer conscious engineering mindset, he worked with the commission, the staff, and the architect to reduce the building size, ultimately proposed to you in the work order last fall by about 30,000 square feet or 35%. And in the recent bidding, based on Mr. Bargander's input, included in the bidding an alternative option to reduce the size further so that he could determine the potential cost savings versus potential future space shortage trade-off. In the end, we need to do what's right for the long-term health of the utility, which leads to the lowest long-term rates and reliable service. So construction of anything is an expensive proposition. Case in point being the pool next door. The work order presented to you and approved last year was for a project of $17.5 million. And as you've seen, I don't know if it's in your notes yet or will be, the bids came in below that. The timing that Nick had planned to hit the sweet spot for bidding worked out, and bids came in at I think about 17.167. And with MU's engineering culture, I would also point out that the project has had both the soft costs and contingency in that estimated number from the construction costs continue to rise consistently, averaging about 2% a year. So for every year that this project is delayed, about $350,000 in inflation construction costs. 3 years makes $1 million. When contrasting the cost of this project with other similar recent utility projects, let me see, which button do I hit? When contrasting the cost of this project with other similar recent utility projects Myron's been involved with, you can see that this project comes in the middle of the range. Reinforcing the value-driven architecture and engineering that's gone into the plan. And then back. In this picture, you can see the proposed utility building there in the middle, next to some other recent city projects. As you can see, it's built to look conservative, timeless, not particularly stand out as a Taj Mahal or a platinum type project. The materials were selected from a matrix that shows, and I know it's very hard to read, but the highlighted materials are the materials that were selected. And the farther to the right on the matrix, the more expensive the materials are. So the materials selected for the project are from the middle and lower, and were essentially selected for both cost and longevity. As Ron mentioned when he introduced us, financing right now is very inexpensive, 2% or less. Building during these historically low bond and lending rates will save the city and the ratepayers millions of dollars. The difference between 2% and 4% is $350,000 a year in interest over 20 years. This project has been considered and delayed for a number of years already. Continuing to fix issues with patchwork will ultimately continue to waste city and utility resources and lost revenue and stifled in innovation and growth. There's about between $785,000 and $900,000 in costs already expended to bring the project to this stage for the final financing approval. And so last night at the Marshfield Utility Commission meeting, the commission unanimously approved the bonding of the project, and that's why it's on your agenda for tonight, asking you to do the same. Any questions?
All right. Is that your entire presentation? Which is fine, just,
Yes.
okay, all right. Thank you very much. All right, so is there a motion to approve resolution number 2021-01?
I'm sorry, Mayor. We thought this would be a good spot to stop and ask questions. And then Dave Ferris with Ellers will then go through the bond resolution and some of the details there, unless you'd rather us go right on into that.
My mistake.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Guess I'll leave it up to the council and their pleasure.
If that's the way you guys, we just didn't know the way you wanted to do it.
Yeah,
So
no worries.
if that's what you're looking to do, that's fine. So
Yeah.
do you want to start with questions then for Mike now, or do you want to bring in?
Why don't we just do it like you normally do? We'll have Dave go through his part.
Well,
and then we'll
if
ask.
you're not done with your presentation, then
Yep,
keep
I'm
going
sorry.
with the presentation.
Yep. Sorry about that. Dave, you ready?
Nick, didn't you say you were gonna make a couple comments first?
Yeah, I just want to talk briefly about the bidding from last night and some of the results of that, and it kind of correlates into some of the numbers, to the numbers that Dave will be presenting to you shortly. As Mike indicated, 17.5 was the number I came to this body about a year ago and asked for approval, and there was a work order that was approved by this body. We completed the bidding with the assistance of both Birchbox and Myron. The bidding for the project right now and how the bond resolution that you'll see is for 16.65. That's the number for the construction of all aspects, excluding any contingency. Excluding contingency. Contingency would be handled through various means. Where value engineering is obviously a major component of every project, always trying to look at ways to save costs. So that's something that we'll be doing as we go forward. Obviously, any changes to the project as it goes on gets captured in change orders. And then the other aspect would be that any cash, any additional cash to be needed, we would take that out of reserve. As far as the bid results themselves, specifically, I just wanted to mention that about $2 million of the project costs will go directly to contractors that are in Marshfield. They are Total Electric, and there is Mara Roofing and others that won portions of this project that are right here in the town. In addition, there were some contractors headquartered in other locations like Madison, Ashland, the Fox Valley area, and Eau Claire. And it's likely that a number of their labor force from these companies will be using our local restaurants and obviously our hotels and motels to be staying on site as they work on the project. And I think we all understand the situation that some of those businesses are facing right now, and any support that we can provide as this project goes on will be, I'm sure, greatly appreciated. So I just wanted to provide you a quick recap on that, and now I'll turn it over to Dave to go into the bond sale and the resolution that was included in your pack.
Do you need me to share my screen, or is somebody going to put that up, put the report on the screen?
I think it's going to be easiest for you to share.
Okay. Is that big enough for everybody to see?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Okay, so this is a report that you've seen from us a couple of times in the past. This is the pre-sale report. And what the pre-sale report does is documents basically some of the planning that's gone into coming up with what the proposed borrowing that we would take to the market would be. So from a year ago where I stood at your meeting where we were talking about refunding the 2010 revenue bonds, probably even prior to that for Nick, we've kind of been working with staff and looking at scenarios and running some bond runs just to see what this might look like. We're bringing you a report today that kind of shows what we're planning on taking to the market. We hope to get a lot of good bids and come in lower than this $16,845,000 that we're initially taking to the market. So on page 1, this, like I said, this is the $60,845,000 electric system revenue bond series 2021A. The purpose is to fund the electric building construction and what goes into that. The bond is set up to have payments that will run from 2023 to 2041. There are a couple of years where there isn't principal, where the utility wanted to delay the principal to have interest only to help improve a little bit on the cash flow and the coverage. So you'll see that when we get to the repayment schedule. As far as the call date, right now the call date is at December 1st of 2032, meaning that if interest rates are really good compared to what the rate is on the bond at that time, you'll have an opportunity to refund that, just like we did with the 2010 this last year. The next item is the bank qualification. There's a limit on how much you can borrow in a year to be able to have banks participate in bids. And because this project is over $10 million, you would probably lose some of the local banks or maybe some other banks that could not bid on this because it's too big. The other thing that this impacts, it'll impact the city's borrowing as well, because they consider the bond council considers the issue of the 16 million and what the city is proposing to do this year to be from the same place. So the interest rates are affected a little bit. As we talked about at the Utility Commission, in the first 10 years of the bond, that isn't really a very big change, but once you get pretty much from year 10 through 20, it's just a little bit south of 0.50% or 50 basis points. So there is a little bit of you see a little bit of an uptick, and that's mostly because we've lost a little bit of our bidders. But hopefully with the size of the bond and the block sizes, we'll get some good interest out of this anyways, and maybe we can come in at some better rates than you might expect. As far as the rating, we will be setting up a call with Moody's on February 3rd to talk about the utilities' financial standing, what's going on, what the project's about. They'll get back to us in time to go to the market on the 18th of February. And I would assume that based on the financial standing of the utility, that we will have no issue with maintaining that AA3. As Ron talked about and stole my thunder earlier, we're doing this one by parameters. We set up some certain amounts that the underwriters have to stay within or to be qualified. They aren't super hard to stay within, but at least it gets us bids that are more realistic, and we're able to adjust some of those maturities so that we can take advantage of maybe if they end up giving us premium, we might be able to push some principal up and maybe take advantage of reducing the amount of the financing costs in the end. As far as the method of sale, like I said, we're going to have this be done on a competitive bid basis, meaning that we'll have underwriters. It says banks. It'd be a pretty big bank like Chase was in the spring. Underwriters from local and regional and national that will bid on it. I would assume with the size of this that we might see some underwriters out of state bidding on these as well. So let's see here. As far as risk factors, your utility is in very good shape right now. What we have to tell you about, though, is if for some odd reason there would be a shortfall in cash, that the city may have to levy a tax to make up that shortfall. I would say that would seem very remote at this time, because your utility does have a pretty good financial status. So we're required to tell you that is a risk that if they didn't, that you may have to levy a tax for it. And we tell you about that all the time when we're doing the city's issues and they're using other funding sources like TIF. That's the same kind of a situation. As far as the other service providers, Quarles and Brady is your bond counsel. Your paying agent is Bond Trust Services, and Moody's is your rating agency. We're here tonight to present the pre-sale report and have you authorize the parameters resolution to sell the bonds. We'll have the conference with the Moody's rating agency on February 3rd. The official statement, which is the document that is sent out to the underwriters to evaluate and take a look and see that they want to bid, will come out the week of the 8th. Ron, who is the primary authorizer, if you so choose to approve that resolution tonight, with Nick being the backup, will sign off on the low bid on February 18th. And then on March 11th, the money will be transferred into the utilities account so that they can begin paying the project costs or reimbursing some of the soft costs that have occurred up until that point. As far as the schedules that are in here, this one's not going to stick great, but as Nick talked about, there's a certain amount that he wanted to finance with the bonds, which was $16,650,000. This, that did not include the contingency. So probably to be a little clearer, we probably should have put it at the 17 million number and shown that there was an amount that would be covered by reserves. As far as the debt service reserve, there's a certain amount that's required to be kept on hand. That's in the bond documents that you have to do. There's 3 different ways to calculate it, but you have almost $2 million on hand because of the 2010 issue. When we add the 2021 issue on top of it, we need to be at $2.5 million. It's 125% of the average payments. So that we're gonna need to increase the debt service reserve by about $600,000. The utility is going to use available cash to fund that. So as you can tell, we are not bonding for any of that debt service reserve requirement, which in many cases that is covered by the bond. So the utility will be using cash for that. The next item are estimates of what the issuance expenses will be going into sale day. These get tightened up on sale day. The utility will be using cash to finance those as well, whatever they come out to. One of the big bid items in the sale day is the Underwriters Fees. Right now we have it in as the maximum amount, which is $12.50 for bond. But they typically, as you remember from our earlier issue, maybe this last fall, that they typically do not take the whole thing. It's a one way that they use for winning the bid. They reduce that, and then the combination of that and interest rates ends up getting them the potential of being the winning bid. We estimated about $18,000 in interest income. The city can look at, the utility can look at other ways that they might be able to increase that, which would give them a little bit extra money if they so desire. And then because we always issue bonds on a $5,000 increment, there's just a little bit of rounding to get us to that 5,000 mark. The coverage, so to read this, basically the important number as far as how to calculate this is the net system revenues. The total, the net net system revenues have to be at least 1.25 of the debt service payments. So the way to read this is that, in 2021, we're at about 2.4 million. We could actually be at about $7 million if you take what you have in capacity to here. So really, we're in pretty good shape on coverage. And the lowest this can ever be without being in violation of your ordinances is 1.25. And as you can see, you're well above that. So we're in really good shape as far as coverage is on this schedule. This also lays out the debt service requirements, the payments that you'll have in the future. And as I talked about earlier, there are 2 years of interest only to assist with a little bit of the coverage as we go into the next user rate study, which is, I think Nick was talking about around 2022 or 2023 for that. The last picture that I have for you is just the interest rate. And as we talked, last fall, we're still in this really good environment where the rates are still way down. So, unless something really crazy happens, we're still going to get very good rates. I wouldn't think that the change in presidential administration will make things go way back up, at least not that fast. So I would think that we're still going to have a sale with really good rates once again. So that's all I have at this time. If you have any questions about the pre-sale report, I'd be happy to answer that. Or if Nick wants to add something at this time, please feel free.
All right, that's the end, and we'll put it into a motion. All right, so is there a motion to approve resolution number 2021-01? Motion by Mr. Peschel, second by Mr. Rosendich. Discussion. Mr. Bargender.
Thank you, Mayor. First question is on the interest and the total cost of the project. And maybe Dave from Ehlers can answer this. We'd be looking at bonding $16,845,000. The interest rate, according to this chart here in front of us, if over 20 years, if nothing changed, it'd be $2,120,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it would give a total cost of the project.
No, that's the 2010 issue. The new issue would be $4,281,000.
So you're correcting me, it's $4 million worth of interest?
That's correct.
Okay, so that would give the total project cost approximately $20 million. Is that correct?
That would be how much the financing would be, yes.
Total project cost with the borrowing and the interest would be $20 million. Is that correct?
$21,126,732.
$21 million. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for now.
All right, any further discussion? Mr. Witzel.
Thank you, and I think this question is probably for Mr. Barris. Forgive me, I'm not a financial guy, but we're tied. We're tied to this utility situation. There's a reason they're coming to us to approve this. We're tied, and to put it in, I guess, the closest layman terms I can come up with, essentially they need us to co-sign the loan. If they can't make the payments, it falls on us. Essentially, we're sort of co-signing the loan, and if it was talked about in more personal financing situations, right?
Since they're a part of the city, that is correct.
Okay.
The financing is supposed to be paid by user fees, and if for some reason something went belly up, that would probably be the answer, yes.
Okay. With that in mind, and I know that you're well aware of our situation, and this is something that we've struggled with, especially as we went through budget time. What I'm wondering is, since there's this tie, and obviously we expect the utility to be healthy, we expect the utility to make all the payments, we don't expect this to fall on the city at all, but because we're tied, because there's this connection, what effect does this borrowing have on the city? So I guess I'm wondering a couple of things, and I think you alluded to it, one of those items already. How does it affect our borrowing ability, both now and in the future? And how does this potentially affect our credit rating if we're going to be on the hook, so to speak, for another $16-17 million? Does that affect us at all, or is that a totally separate, independent thing?
Well, the utility does not affect the city's borrowing, except in this case where there will be a little bit of an effect on the interest rate this year. That will only be for this year because the city would have to borrow $10 million next year then. So it's on an annual basis. There is also talk going towards the new administration of raising that bank qualified to $30 million. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen fast enough to help you out here for this borrowing. But basically, the credit rating will not have an effect. They are able to show that they will have the coverage to be able to make these payments. And the other thing that I think you can see is that once the 2010 is paid off, you have your revenues that are all going to go towards this new issue instead, and your coverage really shoots up, almost by, 5. From 2.74 to 8.04. So, it should not affect your credit rating for the city. Moody's has taken a look at the electric utility, I think twice this year, and they have not changed that. They have pretty good, very positive things to say about the utility's financial status. So I would not think that the utility will affect the city's rating or ability to borrow.
Thank you.
Other than that interest rate that we talked about.
Thank you, Mr. Hendler.
Thank you, Your Honor. The question I have is, You know, we were in the same position here sometime back with the power plant that we built, 30-some million dollars, correct? What's the progress on that? Has that been paid off, and has that been considered in this situation?
In the spreadsheet that, on page 8, that talks about that debt service, that existing debt service, and what we refinanced this year. Sorry.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking the questions for the people out there, you know, we've got that obligation out there yet, and yet we're adding another obligation. And these are some very difficult times, and it just seems to me that that your project is a valid project. I have no problem with that. But my concern is about the dollars and cents that are involved in this thing. And as Mr. Witzel indicated, if something goes south, and it's always easy to happen in this day and age, you know, we're stuck with another situation. And I certainly don't want to be in that position. I may not be around at that time anymore. So I could say I don't care, but I do care, because we just got done with an issue of adding one of our biggest property taxes in 10 years. And I feel that if we go ahead with this project, there will be excuse me, an increase in the people that consume this service, the electricity. And I don't know how they would feel about it, because it's difficult out there. We've got a rampant unemployment rate. We've got the COVID issue. And the federal government is sort of up in the air on many things. So I feel very uncomfortable about it, unless you can convince me or Mike that you folks are in good shape, and you do have a large, maybe this is another thing you mentioned, you do have a large reserve. And I'd like to maybe consider you using that reserve, or if you don't, what are your plans for it? And I heard said that it was for lead piping. Well, we haven't had any lead piping work done for quite some time. So, so my question is, why isn't that used to help reduce some of your costs?
Hey, Dave, are you on yet?
Yeah, I am.
Would you mind maybe taking that question from Mr. Handler?
Well, I think, Nick, this is probably more for you, because not only are you using some of that reserve to pay for your reduction in how much we're actually financing, but you're also paying for your issuance costs and your debt service reserve out of those funds. So you are applying that reserve, I think, that you have.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of this, John Cameron is another individual with Ellers who specializes in utilities, and unfortunately he wasn't available this evening. But as we were looking at financing and how that should be structured, we reached out to Dave and John and asked, all right, here's what, and they're very familiar with our financial situation, and said, all right, here's where we're at, here's the debt we're looking at, what's your recommendation on how we should proceed? And they indicated that given the low interest rates now, and maintaining a healthy utility for the future so that we can address those projects, like you said, along with renewables, and given that we have proper debt coverage and all the proper metrics, they felt that this is the most appropriate path in order to finance this project.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, you know, one of the things that Moody's looks at, and when you're talking about the effect on credit rating, one of the things that Moody's looks at is how much cash we have, how many days of cash we have to operate on. And typically that number is somewhere around 300 or so that we want to see, Nick? So, you know, that would be another thing. If we spend down some of the cash that they look at, that could affect maybe the financial status as well.
So, excuse me. So you think that the 26 million we still, or whatever the number is on the power plant that we have out there, which actually runs on its own, understand, you know, they do have some overhead costs that are absorbed by that, but at the same time, by adding this to that, you know, you've got over 40-some million dollars out there hanging out there as a liability. You may feel good about it, but it makes me nervous thinking of those high numbers. So, well, I'll let somebody else talk.
I guess to speak to that, yes.
Go ahead.
Nervous, I'm confident in the fact that we've done our due diligence in this process and used the financial advisors and others to make sure that we're making wise decisions. Otherwise, if we felt that there was any gaps or any holes here, we obviously would not have put forward to this body. Back to your point on the cash reserves, I mean, I'm sure many of you have read about Wisconsin Rapids and the things that they're going through with the closure of the paper mill. That's had a direct impact, obviously, on the economy there, but ultimately that's had an impact on the utility as well. And you may have read that they've recently passed a measure where they could use the tax roll for pass to electric. We don't have that ability here in Marshfield, but they've done that now because their utility is not in such a financial situation as we are. Cook County Utilities a few years ago lost a major customer. They went through a heartburn for about 6 months to a year before they were able to get their rates readjusted so that they could move forward. National Utilities a number of years ago made a bad decision to end up going south, and they had to sell they went bankrupt, and it's owned by an independent, and now the utility is being purchased back. And I guess we've learned from those experiences, and that's part of the reason we're making these decisions and using these different resources to make sure that we're putting us in a good spot for the future and having those cash reserves.
What kind of rate increases are you projecting for the next 10 years?
The rate increase that we've forecasted with working with elders is it's a $4 on the residential per month. And that's an all-in. I want to make sure we're clear on that. The last rate increase was in 2017 for the electric utility. 2023, we're right now forecasting a $4 increase on the residential customer per month. That's all in. That includes the building and everything else that I'm doing at the utility and that we're doing at the utility. So if you annualize that across each year, talking about 1%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Butke.
That number always scares us. It scares everybody. But here's my big concern. This project is not going away. It's still going to be there. We've gone through this with the library. We've gone through this with the fire station, so on and so forth. What really perked my ears up here is, what is it going to cost? First of all, we don't know the interest rates, what the interest rates will be. I think, in my opinion, I think they're going to go up eventually here. So by waiting longer, it's going to cost more money, and the construction costs going up. Could you maybe summarize, somebody from Ehlers maybe, or Nick? It could be substantial what we're, by waiting to get this project going, what it's going to cost. You got the construction going up, and then you got the interest rates. They aren't going to stay like they are now, and we know that. So that's my concern now. The 17 million scares me as well. It's hard for especially us old people that see this stuff, but that's what buildings like this cost nowadays. It's hard to figure. When I was young, what stuff costs now. But could you address that again, please? What potentially is it going to cost us by waiting a year, 2, 5, 10 years, or whatever? And I know you can't. You can just give us an estimate.
Well, 2 comments I'd like to make. One I'll make, and actually, if you don't mind, I'll invite Matt up from Myron Construction, who's much more of an expert in the field of construction costs. Obviously, as we all know, Myron does considerable amount of work in this space.
Nick, can you just talk a little louder so that people watching can see?
Sorry.
That's all right.
The one comment, I understand the dollar amount. I totally understand that. Keep in mind, on an annual basis, our budget annually is $35 million. So I don't know if that helps puts it in somewhat of a perspective. What this cost is roughly half what we deal with on an annual basis. On a daily basis, our cost per day is about $100,000 of expenses to run the utility. These numbers, while I realize from a personal perspective, they are scary. But when you're in the business world and you're dealing with these types of numbers on a daily basis, it's normal. So I'll let Matt kind of talk a little bit about some of the cost potential for delaying.
All right, so I'm Matt Fry, project exec with Myron, and I guess, kind of hearing some of the comments about construction costs. I'll just give an example. So one of our prime things that we're dealing with right now, our bidders, and in fact, on some of the quotes that you may see here over the period of time, it's like steel in particular, they're only holding that number for approximately 3 to 15 days because it's so volatile right now in steel. And frankly, it's been doing nothing but escalating. That's just fact. And they're anticipating that steel in itself is going up 30% over the next several months, right? Now, this is projections, just like anything, it's interest rates, right? But what we're seeing right now is that the overall, product line is going up, right? So again, anything from steel is probably the best example. I'll make another note that the market right now, people are hungry, right? So construction, COVID related, we are considered essential business. Myron is very fortunate to have all our job sites open throughout this pandemic. The reality is that work around this time, specifically in the winter when you bid, everyone is hungry, and we had a very good coverage. We're seeing really good numbers come in. I think you could talk to any contractors around the table that the bid market is strong right now, and that's something that we need to take advantage of. But I think I answered the question.
So, and again, it's projection, but how about a number? On a project that's around $7 million, it's substantial, is it not?
Yeah, I don't know if I could really say, percentage wise, I think it's 2-3%, right, over the course of the year. But the reality is that the longer you wait, the more, that's just nature. You look at the price per square foot when you build your house 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that's just reality, right? Things are becoming more expensive. So to physically put a number on it, I can't say, but I can say that it will go up significantly the longer that you put it. That's just reality.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Spiros.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of follow-up questions. Nick, you said that approximately the cost to ratepayers would be, a residential home would be about $4 a month. Can you tell me what it would be for someplace like the Marshfield Clinic every month, rail transport, large businesses?
The $4 per month breaks out to about 5%, a 5% increase.
Okay.
And if you, again, go back to the example, the last rate increase happened in 2017. If you annualize that, while it's a 5%, I realize it in 2023, you're really only talking about a 1% annually.
Okay. And if you look at places like the grocery stores or anything like that, where do you think that they would recoup that 5% increase? From their customers, possibly?
Yes, wherever their revenue stream comes from, yes.
Right. So residential customers will see the $4 a month increase on their bill, and then they'll see an increase at every business that they go to in the city of Marshfield as they try to make up for the increase on their bills. And then the second question or follow-up would be that we recently put a Band-Aid on building a new police station by buying them a garage to house their buildings. We have the city garage that we've all been requested to go take tours of, and we know where that conversation's going. We can see the writing on the wall. So I'm asking, how will that affect those projects in the future? Will our interest rate be higher to borrow for those projects? Will that delay those projects even further? Will that affect our ability to borrow for those projects? And I don't think that's from you. I think it's from whatever his name was. I'm sorry. I'm bad with names. It's not meant to be rude.
David Ferris.
David.
There, Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Ferris, can you take that one?
Do you know what year you're going to borrow for any of those buildings? Do you have that on your 5-year plan anywhere? They aren't this year, are they?
No, they're not this year, but they're on, I'm sure they're on a wish list for very soon.
Yeah. So when we borrow for projects for the city, we use general obligation debt. And so the reason that we use revenue bonds for the utilities is so that they don't use up the city's ability to borrow. So as far as what the utility is doing, they are not having any impact on your ability to borrow for your city project. They use revenue bonds because revenue bonds are paid for by user fees. So, as far as, if you look at the user and the taxpayer as being one person, obviously they're going to pay for, whether it's a police station, a pool, or whatever, as well as they're going to pay for any improvements to your utilities. It just comes from two different bills, I guess you might want to say. But it won't impact your ability to borrow for those city projects. And the interest rate, like I said, this year, because of how big this borrowing is, it does have an impact on the city's interest rate, but it won't after this year. So 2022 stands by itself. So any projects you have, as long as we're not borrowing more than $10 million, your interest rate will be, what it would normally be. I can't predict where you'd be as far as in the market, but as you can tell, if you can see what I've got on my screen, the risk you run by waiting, which I want to just piggyback on the engineers thing is here we are, in October of 18 at 4%, 4+%. You could double your interest cost by waiting as well, but who knows that? That's so crystal ball. So does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Mr. Butke.
Rebecca's got a good point, about all these other projects, but I've heard it from at least one other alderman, and this has nothing to do with this necessarily, but we have to have a plan. We've got a 5-year capital plan, but we got a schedule. If the city garage, for example, is going to be 10, 20 years from now, put it down there so we know what to expect, so this kind of stuff isn't coming up all at one time. This is what happened for years, because we kept putting stuff off, and then all of a sudden you got a whole bunch of things. We got to fit that in the police department and all of these things, and we got to weigh what's maybe more important or what we can do, but we've got to get a long-range plan.
And Mr. Bucky, to your point, it's a very good point. And then when you go and you put that in the plan to do it, then you have a certain, you're going to run into these obstacles even when you put it in. But your point is a very good one. I just want to ask Mr. Ferris just a question. If let's just say hypothetical, you wait a while and the project cost goes, even though we heard from the expert that the project cost is going to go up, but let's say hypothetically it went down to 15 million, but interest rates are double. We're going to be paying more. The residents are going to be paying more with that higher interest rate than we will now at 2.5. I mean, if you look at that graph on where we got it, probably in August or so of 2020, and where it's going, that it's not going to go any lower. And we know that steel and everything else, those things aren't going to go any lower. And I just think that's something to consider. Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I have a couple of project questions, some notes that I took while the first part of the presentation was being provided. The building that currently stands there is over 50 years old. If I understand correctly, it's probably one of the oldest buildings that we have that we're utilizing for some city-connected services. The concern that I have, and I know that this was a comment that was made, this project is built for the future, hopefully for another 50 years. And I think one of my big concerns is that it seems as though construction projects are done with some level of obsolescence built in that we build and then suddenly we need bigger, we need newer, we need whatever, and it's as low as 20 years down the road. What have you put in place to make sure that this project does last for 50 years, as was commented?
It's a really good question. In 1966, when this building was built, nobody imagined the digital age that's come along. And so everything in the current building has been retrofitted. So modernizing to the digital age, planning ahead for the renewable transition in the economy that's coming. We don't have it in the current scope of the project, but we hope to have renewables for that building at some point in the future. Scaling up for the transition to the electric economy with electrification of cars. Those are the kinds of things that we've talked about for that. We also planned ahead in the sense of additional space and being able to go vertical in that building with an additional floor if necessary for additional space instead of what we're having to do this time of demolish the building and start over.
Okay, that does, I guess, answer a big significant part of my question. This is built so that if we're bursting at the seams, as we hear so often in so many other departments or situations, that there is the ability to add on upward rather than spreading out more. That's positive. The only other question I had, I guess, or another comment that was made, the idea of bringing everybody into one building, water is in one place, electric is in another, and there's maybe some people scattered here and there. It'd be more efficient to have everybody under one roof. One thing that I guess I'm kind of questioning on that, how much cross work is there between electric and water? I mean, to me, they seem sort of separate. Obviously, I don't ever take electricity into the bathtub, but you know, what cross what cross department work does this help to resolve?
Well, I just want to answer your first question with one extra piece.
Okay.
That you did, Mike talked about expanding out, which is definitely part of it that we planned for. We've also provided the ability to expand out a little bit as well in our garage space. So that was another consideration that we did to help make sure that it lasts the 50 years. As far as the cross, I think that right now what we have is we have laborers in both departments that have the ability to cross over. One thing that we're seeing on the electric side a considerable amount of times is the need to do flagging on roadway projects. So we're able to pull water staff to come in and help with that. In addition, there's material as far as barricades and things of that, cones that could be cross-utilized between the two. Another area that could be that'll be cross-utilized is the shop area, if you will, because obviously we're fixing different types of equipment at a time, so we can have one dedicated shop instead of having two mismatched ones. So those are some of the areas that way. Other efficiencies are just going to be the ability for our IT staff to be able to support the water department with their questions instead of having to go across town, things of that sort, especially if stuff isn't working, or my ability to interface with the water staff instead of having to travel across town and so forth. So I think some of those are some of the efficiencies that'll solve together.
Okay, and if I may have one last little quick question. What happens with those other properties that are currently owned that I would guess would then be liquidated and put back on the tax rolls?
Just going to jump in and throw that in before you even ask, but thank you for asking. Yes, we expect that we would be able to dispose of or sell that property and let it go back onto the tax rolls. It's we currently estimate that it might have a value of about $275,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been rather quiet tonight, unusual for me, I'm sure, but because it's like deja vu all over again. Every time any department head, any commission, or any agency of the city, I did. Is that better? Basically, like I said, it's a little bit like deja vu all over again. We always get the same story from everybody, and that is, do it now because it's going to cost you more later. Well, yeah, that's true, it is. But what they don't take into consideration, I think, is not the sweet by and by, but the nasty here and now. And the nasty here and now is our community is not doing all that well because of the pandemic. It's not as bad as we thought it was going to be, but it's not back to full strength yet. We just asked the citizens for the biggest tax increase in 12 years, 10 years, something like that. And we just got that. And when you guys made your initial presentation, I'm sure you noted there was some skepticism on the part of the council as to whether or not you needed a building that big, or as Mr. Everall said very well, right up at the front, the questions were too big, not now, too expensive. All those things I still agree with. It is too big, it is the wrong time, and it's too expensive. The other problem I've got with it is I get a kick out of this. I was reading through the statutes on funding for utilities, and I noticed that some of the statutory language makes its way into the resolution. And I like it. I really like that language. It says that we're going to fund certain additions, improvements, and extensions to the electric utility system, ... including construction and equipping of a new electric utility building. And that made me think a little bit. In other words, I know you need a garage. I know you need more garage space, and I know you need to bring the restrooms up to ADA standards. And I know there are probably some other improvements you need to make. But what are the citizens going to get out of this? What are the ratepayers going to benefit off of this? Basically, they aren't. They're going to get a 4% rate or 4-cent rate increase. Is that $4 based on 4%, I think, of the average bill? But I just can't fathom that the ratepayers are going to benefit from this in any way, shape, or form. And it is the wrong time to do it. I feel that pushing through with this project now in the middle of a pandemic, for the sole purpose, apparently, of being able to take advantage of the contractors who are hungry for work and the lower interest rates, and that's one thing, but then again, at some point in time, the citizens are going to have to pay the piper. So I'm sorry, I can't support this. I told you about this from day one. I've been honest with Mr. Cum about this. I haven't had any direct contact with Mr. Eberl on this, I don't believe. I have with Mr. Miller, but I'm sorry, I just won't be able to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bargender.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make sure everyone can hear me well here. These will be my final comments. As a member of the Common Council and the Board of Public Works, each year I help make decisions that spend millions of dollars worth of taxpayers' dollars. Before I make those critical decisions, I always ask myself, is it in the best interest of the citizens of the city of Marshfield? Does it benefit the citizens of the city of Marshfield? And lastly, does it save taxpayer dollars? And I look at this, $21 million after financing, and I cannot see that. I cannot justify that in my mind. The public cannot justify that number. I'm very concerned about raising the rates 5%. People on fixed incomes, the working poor in our cities, the farmers, they're all going to have to pay more. Alderman Spiros alluded to this earlier. There's the trickle-down economic effect of raising the rates. When we go into a restaurant, grocery store, Menards, etc., they're all going to raise their rates. So we're all going to have to pay a little bit more. And the public on social media, they use terms like Taj Mahal, glass tower, overkill. And I agree with those people 100%. And I posted that on those blogs. Like Mr. Wagner said, I too have been opposed to this from the beginning. I understand there's deficiencies on that building, but it's only 55 years old. A lot of people live in homes here in Marshfield that are 100 years old, 140 years old, they date back to. We're not tearing them down. We remodel, we renovate. We run new electrical, we run new cables for our internet, etc. I've always said, I'd like to use some of that old building. I'd like to see an addition for garage space. New facade, ADA restrooms, more secure area for customer service. I agree with all that 100%, but I just can't agree on spending $22.4 million, whatever it was, and putting that burden on the taxpayers and the ratepayers of the city of Marshfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fire.
Sitting here listening to this, I understand, you know, it's a big sum of money, but let's look at the big picture. 3 years from now, this is going to hit the rate. $4 a month. 3 years from now, when you go to the grocery store, that $4 a month is going to be nothing what the increase is going to be. I can tell you that being in the food business, if I buy steak today, 2 months from now, I have no guarantee on anything. You haven't got a guarantee on anything in this world right now. And the cost of living goes up every day. I can remember when I bought my first brand new car for $6,500. Right now, you can't buy a brand new car for less than $20,000. You can't find a used one that's any shape for less than $20,000. So you have to get with the times. And Tom and I have been around here long enough. This has been an issue for a long time. I remember when they bought the building on Oak Street, I think it was maybe 15 years ago, and they said, well, we'll probably have this for 5, 6 years. Well, here it is 15, 20 years later, and we still haven't moved off dead center. So this is not a new program. This is something that's been evolving. If we looked at what it would have cost back then to build a new building, what it is now, it'd be a heck of a lot less, because you got to realize, when I first bought my house where I live now, I paid $17,000 for it, and right now it's worth $100,000. So that's how long? I can't even do the math now. It's about 40-some years. So in 40-some years, I've got a good investment in my $17,000. And it's just what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to spend $16 million for this project, it's probably a good investment for the ratepayers, for the citizens of Marshfield, and for the future. And the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost. And if you say it's not, then you must be like an ostrich. You got your head in the sand, because it's just not going to go away. So I guess we should think about moving on with this and just do it.
All right, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Mr. Hendler.
I got to take another poke at this. Yes, there have been a lot of things said, and a lot of things are true. But on the other side of the coin, I have to agree with Rebecca Spiros that there is a trickle-down effect, and it's pretty tough for a senior citizen who lives on somewhere between $900 and $1,100 a month of Social Security. When I went through getting my signatures, I had 3 people who are, my God, they're older than I am. And they were very, very concerned about the tax increase and, of course, this. And I tried to tell them that, the city has not taken a step forward in a lot of internal facilities, and we've hit the crossroad in doing so. But my feel is that we should wait at least until we get through this COVID thing. This one has a lot of influence on a lot of people. And I've known people that shop groceries online. They never go out. They're all about my age, and they're worried. They are worried. And I think given the different situation, they probably wouldn't. But I think we ought to put this off for a while until we get through this COVID thing.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, please vote. All right, that motion carries 6-5. Thank you. Item L, second reading of ordinance number 1447 to rezone a portion of the property located at 800 North Maple Avenue, parcel 33-02037 from SR4 single family residential to UMU urban mixed use, presented by Bryce, Hembrook, city planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So city staff received a request to approve a certified survey map for the property at 800 North Maple Avenue.
The certified survey map proposed to split the lot and have an outlot on the west side of the property. The outlot has a parking lot on it for the Dairy Queen that is across the alley, and it is undevelopable. The certified survey map could not be approved as presented until a rezoning and a conditional use permit were approved, because the parking lot would now be considered to be off-site parking, which would require those additional approvals first. So staff incorporated a provision in the ordinance to set a deadline for obtaining a conditional use permit in order to make the site conforming. So with that, if that approval is not obtained by the deadline, the zoning would revert back to SR4, single family residential, which is what is currently zoned. And staff would only recommend approving the rezoning with that provision included. So this is the second reading, and thus the recommendation is to approve ordinance number 1447. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a motion to approve ordinance number 1447. Motion by Mr. Butkey, second by Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. And that motion carries 10-0. Thank you. Item M, first reading of ordinance number 1448 to amend Chapter 18, General Zoning Ordinance, Section 18-658, Section 18-659, Section 18-72, and Section 18-73, presented by Bryce, Hembrook, City Planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So staff presented some options to the Plan Commission regarding some of the regulations that we have on accessory structures in the city of Marshfield. These pertain to residential and non-residential accessory structures. So in the past few years, we've received quite a lot of conditional use permits for exceptions to the requirements to our accessory regulations. And anytime we receive a large number of requests for this, we want to kind of reassess our regulations and see if we can improve them. So overall, we've looked at how other municipalities regulate accessory structures, and we've also received feedback with the Plan Commission several times over the course of the last 2 years. We've come up with the following changes, and I've also included a longer list in the packet, but I'll just kind of go over some of the larger changes. Number one, we would have allow up to 2 detached residential accessory structures on the site. Attached accessory structures such as an attached garage would not count towards this total. It would just be included. A combined total of 1,500 square feet of gross floor area of all accessory structures on the property is permitted by right when the ground floor area of the principal structure is 1,200 square feet or larger. If the ground floor area of the principal structure is under 1,200 square feet, then the total allowable accessory structure area shall be 1,200 square feet. So currently our code allows for either 1,200 square feet of accessory space or the total amount of the ground floor area of the principal structure, whichever is less. So for example, if a house is 890 square feet, then they would be restricted to only 890 square feet of accessory space. So that would include garages, sheds, etc. Also, we have kind of clarified what is meant for accessory structures for non-residential to kind of include gas station canopies, and also talk about how these structures could be used to store equipment and showcase or store materials for businesses on site. This is kind of how we've looked at it in the past. However, it was never clearly stated. So we figured that it would be best just to include this in the regulations. One thing to note is that even if the maximum size is increased, the owner will still have to meet all setbacks and all other requirements, such as building coverage of the lot. And increasing the maximum allowable building space essentially allows for property owners that have enough space on their property to expand. And if you're held to some of the other regulations, then you wouldn't be able to expand. So Plan Commission reviewed this item in December and recommended to approve the request. This is the first reading, and thus there is no action requested at this meeting or required at this meeting. However, the second reading is scheduled for January 26th. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bryce. Any questions for Bryce? Mrs. Spiros.
Bryce, I just have one question.
Yep.
What is a gas station canopy?
So a gas station canopy would be the structure that's located above where you fill, like for the fuel station,
Okay, got you.
basically covers
Okay.
from the rain.
All right.
All right, no further questions. Thank you, Bryce.
Thanks.
Item O, any suggested items for future agendas? All right, seeing none, about a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Oh, there, a motion by Mr. Rosenberg, second by Mr. Fire. I started looking. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.